Hi.
Okay. Dober večer. Danes smo z vami Živa iz društva Fokus, Živa iz Bune in najin gost Christopher iz Kameruna, iz Inštituta za kakav, doktor agronomije, ja, iz univerze. Pogovarjali se bomo o kakavu, ampak bomo vse skupaj naredili v angleščini, tako da bom zdaj jaz nehala v slovenščini govoriti. Upam, da vam je to vsem ok. So, hello Christopher. Thank you for being with us this evening. We are very glad that you came from Cameroon to take time to talk to us, to come to Slovenia. Because in Slovenia we eat a lot of chocolate, but yeah, we sadly very a lot of times we recognize that we don't know a lot about cocoa and about the people working with cocoa, working in the cocoa production and so on. So tonight we would like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about it, and then we will open a discussion and you can all join in, ask questions. So we really all have a chance to ask Christopher whatever we are interested in concerning the cacao or in even Africa or Cameroon or whatever questions you have. And if the question will be inappropriate, we will just not answer it, okay? But otherwise, we will try to answer everything.
Yeah, so I maybe suggest that Christopher, you just present yourself and tell why did you start researching actually cocoa? What did bring you there?
Thanks very much. So I'm from Cameroon, and in Cameroon, just like other developing countries, the farmers depend, or the population in general, depend a lot on agriculture. And just like nature has designed it, we eat your products as well. We eat your wheat for our bread. We eat your apples, and then you have to eat or use our cocoa to make your chocolate. So it's some kind of exchange, the way I see it. And well, cocoa is a very important crop in my country and in many developing countries. Actually, cocoa is produced in the tropics, just like between 10 degrees north and south of the equator. So it's a limited zone that is provided for cocoa production. And Cameroon being one of the top producing countries, we are interested in improving the cultivation of cocoa in our country because it gives us a lot of revenue. That's why I decided to dedicate my research on cocoa to see how much I can help to improve the livelihood of farmers, people who produce cocoa.
And how exactly do you do it? You actually develop new researchers. You are a teacher, plus you do some research. So what do you try to do?
Yeah, the first thing is to find out the problems. The problems we realized was that the production of cocoa was very much below the potential. Actually, in my country, the production or the yield, if I put it that way, the yield of cocoa is between, say, 300 and 500 kilograms per hectare. But then the potential yield is more than 2 tons. So we believe that there is a big problem between what is being done now and what could be done. So research has to look for the problems that actually prevent in all this the optimum production of cocoa. And actually in a system it cannot be one answer. It could be a lot of different things. That's why we make research to find out which are different components of the system that actually affect this low yield of production of cocoa in my country.
And what would you say are the main reasons? I mean, main topics which are the most important from your point of view?
Yes, so far our data, the data that we collect, they emphasize on the fact that the cocoa plants that we have in the farms right now are very old. They're very old because, cocoa when planted takes about 4 or 5 years to start producing. The production continues to increase up to an optimum at about 30 years. And after 30 years, the production starts to decrease. So what's happening right now in our place is that the cocoa plants that we have are very old. Actually, most of them are more than half a century old. So that is one of the big contributing factors of the low production in the country. And secondly, the farmers, those who produce, are the aging farmers who have less energy to satisfy the demands, the labor demands, because cocoa is a labor-intensive activity. It demands somebody to be out there to clean it, to prune it, to clear the field, in order to protect the parts from pests and diseases. We need young force, young labor force, and most of the young people are leaving to the cities. So only the old people, most of the people working on cocoa farms are old and cannot be able to deliver the goods that are required for optimum production. In addition to the fact that the farmers are poor, and they are poor, they have no means to actually provide the inputs that are important to maintain or increase the yield. Inputs like nutrients, all the time whenever they harvest these cocoa pods, they are carrying nutrients out of the farm, and they need to bring back these nutrients. But their situation is such that they don't have enough money to be able to provide adequate nutrients for these crops. In addition to pest control, is produced in a humid area. Humid areas, they favor fungal diseases, and one of those diseases that attack cocoa is what we call the black pot disease, and so it needs to be treated. So most of them do not have enough finances to buy enough pesticides to counter this problem. And in addition, we have this climate change. Climate change is also is our big problem, because we have some dry spells. These dry spells, they affect the production of the cocoa. Despite the fact that we have a lot of rainfall, we don't have the means to collect, to harvest this water, and sometimes irrigate when there's a need. So the dry spell come to reduce the production of the cocoa. So basically, those are the major problems that affect the cocoa production.
Okay, I will start maybe with my side, since I'm coming from the ecological side of the table. We were talking about the conditions the cocoa that are changed, meaning the cocoa now is growing in different climate conditions that before. You are also researching the possibilities of organic farming, which is beneficial for why is it beneficial for cocoa growing? I mean, if you count the social and environmental consequences.
Yes, we emphasize on organic farming. Why? Because it's an approach that exploits nature. Because it exploits nature, it is something that is sustainable. Nature will always provide. And that is looking at possibilities of using what we have around us to exploit, to produce cocoa. We have natural resources that we can use, especially to improve the soil fertility. But in addition, we realize that some of the waste in the cocoa production process, like the husk, which is obtained after the beans are removed, could also be transformed and used both as a nutrient source and also a way to feed animals. These are different organic approaches. In addition, we have many plants in our country which have the potential to improve soil fertility. So we're looking into all these options to see how we could make cocoa production more sustainable. It should be more on-farm than off-farm. On-farm being that all that you need in the system comes from the farm. Not like all that you need from the system you have to go and buy off the farm, like synthetic products.
So we came to the circling of ingredients, of material, is very important.
Right.
And if we talk about circles, maybe we can actually go to another circles which are more socially important. And maybe, Jiva, you can follow the question linked to the social conditions, maybe where cocoa is grown.
Of course, thank you, Jiva. So, of course, you are doing the research, you are part of the institution, you're in the university, and so on. But the farmers don't get this knowledge. I mean, they don't usually go to the formal education to get all the knowledge, the information that they need to become organic farmers, or even to increase the yields and to start even selling their cocoa in a different manner. So, where do they get the knowledge?
We have the problem. We have the problem of transmitting the knowledge to the farmers, because the farmer is somebody who needs to see and to practice. But we can do all the sophisticated analysis and explanations, but the farmer wants to see what's different between A and B. And somebody has to go out there and show the farmer. Actually, it is the duty of the intermediary between the farmer and the researcher that we call the extension workers. Uh, that is where there's a missing link to an extent. Because if we could work with the research, the extension workers who can easily understand us and carry the message to the farmers, that could help to improve the situation. But right now, from my point of view, I've not seen the extension workers very active in their duties.
Okay, so the farmers actually need to show a lot of initiative at this moment to start changing the situation. So let's just talk about the situation. The farmers you're talking about are mostly small farmers, not big farms, so they don't have a lot of money, a lot of actually access to the even education and not even the markets. How do they deal with that? Or what are the challenges dealing with that?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. The first is that the area that they cultivate is very small. The area they cultivate for cocoa is between 2 and 5 hectares. Like I said, it's very labor intensive. So to increase that, you need more labor force, and usually you need higher labor, which is also expensive. So they have these small farms. Secondly, like you rightly pointed out, the education of these farmers is very important, and we also advocate that these farmers be educated. And actually, it's what is going on with some small organizations in the country, where they try to educate the farmers to make them understand the importance of changing their technology. And it's working with farmers in small cooperatives, and but other farmers who are individuals alone in the system, they still are lagging behind.
But
Most of the
actually, sorry, there was a recent change, which not so far in the past, in the organization of cocoa trade, actually, in Cameroon, wasn't it? Before there was this cocoa board organized by the state, and then
Yeah, before the state had a structure that collected the cocoa and coffee products and sold at the international market. At that point, they could negotiate the prices and have good prices, which also helped the farmers to get the maximum they could from the system. So they had marketing boards, but because of structural adjustment, it led to some liberalization, which made the farmers now to be independent, and everybody is like on his own. It's only now that they're trying to bring them back into cooperative so that they can also exploit this chance of having a force to be able to negotiate the prices at the international market.
how about the small ones, those which are not connected into cooperatives? Those are actually doing something together, so they do gain some force. But what about those which are still alone?
Yeah, those who are still alone, those are those who are really poor, because those who are in the cooperatives, they gain about 3 times those who are individually negotiating with buyers, and but then they have no option because they are usually stranded, you know, and they can negotiate at any time at any price because they want to leave. So it's like very difficult for them to do otherwise.
cocoa plants usually don't grow by themselves. They have other plants around the cocoa. Are they also the plants that people can sell and live out of them or not?
Yes, and actually, many farmers include other crops in their cocoa fields to help their families. So there's a lot of diversification in the cocoa production system, which is very much appreciated because that is one of the kind of system that we are promoting in agriculture, which helps in the carbon sink, as is being said all around. So in cocoa plantations, we can have fruit trees. We can also have food crops, which are commonly eaten by the farmers of the area. Because all the cocoa is nearly for export, but they need to eat, they need to feed their families. So they put the crops there they need to eat in the cocoa field. So some kind of diversification, which is, we appreciate that also because they also help the system.
How much of the process is done in the farms? I mean, the production, and then till which phase the farmers are responsible, what they sell, and how much money do they get for it in comparison to the other part?
Yeah, so the farmer, the cocoa farmer, he produces the cocoa from planting, harvesting. He removes the beans, the fresh beans from the pot. He dries the beans and he bags the beans. He ends there. After bagging the beans, it's sold. It's sold now to those who are going to process and finally produce the great products of chocolate, of cocoa, like chocolate. So it ends at the production at the bagging stage. Yeah, and then what does he gain? Like I said, those who are well organized, they can in my currency they call it 1,500 francs per kilogram. That's close to some like close to 2 point something euro. But those who do not get into cooperatives and then they are exploited by illegal buyers, they gain one third of that, which is less than €1 per kilogram.
What does the government do about it?
The government has a few structures out there, which is there struggling to educate farmers on this idea of forming groups, and also training farmers on different production techniques. The government also tries to see into it that there are some research institutions that can produce high quality planting material, because that's another very important factor that affects the production, the yield. But then these planting materials are not enough to satisfy the many farmers who are involved in cocoa production, and sometimes they are very expensive, not within the reach of some of these farmers.
We know that the world demand for the cocoa is rising, but the supply is decreasing. So actually, in economic sense, the farmer should get more money for their yield. But this is not true in Cameroon, is it?
It's not true. Why? Because the farmer does not negotiate. He doesn't negotiate the price. So those who actually make it are the people after the farmer, those who buy, those who process, that the people making all the profit. So the farmer's profit level has not changed for a long time. We see that if you look at the different actors, the farmer has like 4% in the production, the different compared to all the actors. So it's very small.
Can we talk about history a little bit? Why did cocoa come to Cameroon? Or why did Cameroons even adopt cocoa?
Yeah, cocoa came to Cameroon through in the days of the colonization. The colonial masters they brought cocoa to Cameroon in those about the early 18th, 19th century, or late 18th or early 19th century. That's where cocoa came into Cameroon, brought by our colonial masters. We were first colonized by the Germans. So the Germans would be the origins who brought cocoa into Cameroon, and we embraced it.
But never enough to make your own chocolate.
Yes, actually, looking at how much cocoa is produced, less than 1% is converted, is processed in the country. So it's virtually everything that is produced is exported. Yeah.
So do Cameroonian producers eat chocolate?
Yes, depending on the category. Those who are well placed, they can eat it nearly like you eat in Europe. The middle class, they can struggle to eat it, but the lower class, they might never easily have it.
Okay. What about the roles on the farm? I mean, most of the farms are family owned, so everybody should have a role.
Yes, we have division of labor. Like I said, cocoa is a very labor-intensive activity. So the most difficult activities like to prune the trees. Sometimes you apply the pesticides. These are done by the men. Then we have simple activities like harvesting sometimes and breaking the pods, extracting the beans. There we can have the women and the children participating. You know, women and children will continue up to things like fermentation and also drying. You know, with the supervision of the men in the system.
We all know that fermentation process, I mean, first the production and then fermentation process is very important to give the cocoa beans the right taste. So that and the aroma, so that the chocolate at the end is really good then. But the farmers never eat the chocolate. So how are they supposed to know how to prepare the beans for the
That's
for
important. Actually, like I said, cocoa used to be a very important crop, and many farmers depended on cocoa. And in those days, they knew the rules because the buyers would tell them this is what we're looking for. So they know it, despite the fact that they don't eat the final product.
So it looks like in the past, not so far away, the collaboration between the buyers and the farmers was much closer than it is now.
Yeah, because in those days it was sold by the marketing board. It was not even by the farmer. So all the products were channeled to a marketing board by the state, and then the state sold the cocoa coffee to the international market at a good price, and then compensated the farmers accordingly. Yeah.
You mentioned that the plantations are getting old. The young people don't want to work in the plantations anymore. Is there a future for cocoa in Cameroon?
There should be a future in cocoa, and the future in cocoa is coming through the intervention of these multinational buyers who are coming to educate the farmers on the quality, and that's why we have the fair trade that is coming to play right now, where they're telling farmers, the kind of things that the quality of cocoa that is required in international market, and those farmers who are abiding to this rule, they have some kind of a premium, which is encouraging, and I think that it will grow from strength to strength because others won't be able to copy. But then I think that extra effort in training those who are not yet part of the system should be emphasized.
Meaning the importance of having close relations between buyers and communication between buyers and producers is very important. And also if we were talking about fair distribution of incomes of that actually arise from selling chocolate, because if we look at the normal production, I mean the classical production now, the way the percentage of the price we pay for chocolate in Europe that the farmers get is usually around 6, a little bit more than 6%, but the part of the work done is a lot more. So can
It's true. We know that no cocoa, no chocolate. So it's important that we know that, it's at 6% is true. On the average, we say 4. When we look at the whole world, we say about 4%. In some countries, like more than 7%. But then look at that. And imagine that without cocoa, there is no chocolate. So I think that a lot should be done to make cocoa production sustainable, because they realize that there's a yearly about 3% decrease, which is not going to be interesting with time.
So we saw actually what there are some things which can be done, as you already pointed out, in Cameroon, in the country itself, meaning like educating farmers, connecting farmers into cooperatives of various types of associations, meaning they are stronger in negotiating and everything. Maybe as the organization of this cocoa board was also it looks like something which was beneficial for the farmers. But there is also the other side. I mean, from the buyer who comes to buy the cocoa on, there is still some things going on. What can be done on that side?
Yes, the example we just saw this evening was very impressive. I think you can highlight that, where the producer communicates with the farmer. In that case, they're like in some kind of a business. And the idea that I got from you, I guess, yesterday of divine cocoa is another wonderful way of improving the situation of the farmers. If the farmers become part of the system, you know, such that the industry that is producing, they are in close collaboration with the farmers, then the farmers will surely get their fair share.
So let me just collaborate on that so that everybody will know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Today we were visiting a Slovene producer of chocolate, the only one that makes chocolate from bean to bar in Slovenia. This is 20 chocolate, Sebastian and Martina. They showed us the whole production, and we were able to talk about all these things that we are talking about now also with them, and they are mostly cooperating with Nicaragua at this point. But that means that they are going to Nicaragua, talking to the farmers, they are getting even the education there. This is at this point probably not possible, but in Africa, but in the future, this would be the way to go, definitely. And the second example you mentioned, the divine chocolate, is actually something that we can't get in Slovenia, at least not yet. It's the collaboration between the Ghanaian cooperative, who is actually also the owner or part owner of the chocolate production in Europe, in Great Britain, which means that they don't only get the profits from the sales of the cocoa, but they also get the part of the profits from the sales of the chocolate, which is of course much larger than the profits from the sales of the cocoa. And it's the only fair way if the producers want to be more engaged in the chocolate production. So these are the two examples that you mentioned, right? Yeah.
But maybe just before going to us as those who like to eat good chocolate, uh, there is also other products which are being made from cocoa, which are also being produced to the final item in Cameroon, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we have some farmers, some cooperatives are able to process cocoa to the level of the cocoa butter, and that actually, and cocoa powder, that actually adds a bit of value. But like I said, the number that are doing this very small. But if we can encourage this, and the problem about this, the way I see it, is that if Africa starts producing, the finished products, it might be difficult for them to be transported or to be transferred to Europe because of the taxes. So I think this idea of divine cocoa to me looks like a very challenging
Way to
effort.
go.
Yes, to do it.
Yeah, maybe for you just to have an idea, I think Jiva, you know the numbers, like the difference between importing raw cocoa and chocolate as a final product.
European Union is a very interesting institution. It has this thing called customs, right? We all know about them. And the customs are the thing that protects the European market from the other from crops coming from outside. But because cocoa doesn't grow in Europe, if you just import beans, raw beans to Europe, the customs are 0%. So the European Union doesn't take anything out of it. If you import the divided cocoa butter and the powder, which are then put back together to form a paste, these are sold to European Union in European market at the customs of 9%. So the European gets 9% from that, just administrative costs, of course. And if you sell already made chocolate made outside of Europe, and you sell it in Europe, the European Union charges you 34 or more percent of customs when you import it. So that means that the chocolate begins at 34% higher price than the chocolate made in Europe. So even the biggest brands, like the American brands that we have on all our shelves, all of these chocolates are not made in America, they are made in Europe to avoid these customs. So just the brands are imported into Europe, but the chocolate is made here. So this is how the Americans go around it, which is really clever. But this is also a part why in African countries you don't find production of chocolate. Like you said, for Cameroon, it's less than 1%. And we can also tell you for Ivory Coast that Ivory Coast is the largest producers of cocoa in the world, and they only have factory, one chocolate factory in the whole country. And Ghana, which is the second largest cocoa producer in the world, only has one factory. And in Ghana, they only know three different types of chocolate made in Ghana, which is small, middle, and large. Not like we know all different kinds of chocolates with all the additives and non-additives and everything that should be and shouldn't be in the chocolate, right? Um, so European Union actually runs in the case of Africa especially, runs the show, because 90% of all the cocoa that comes to Europe comes from these African countries that you were mentioning before.
Yeah, here is actually the question already of the trade conditions, because we are talking a lot about the need of free trade, which was understood. It was actually interesting. We were talking with some students coming from different African countries too. They had an exchange program, and we were talking about fair trade, and they were talking about free trade, because actually free trade in Europe is something very biased, let's say. We are talking a lot about free trade, about the need for you to be in the free trade, but at the same time, we don't have free trade for you. So we like to talk in the other direction about fair trade, which would be things we were talking about, which is not helping, which is not humanitarian, right? But it's cooperation.
It's kind of cooperation, right? Because actually it's improving the lives of those who are abiding to the rules of fair trade right now, but which is not the final answer to improve the livelihood of cocoa farmers.
Because there is a lot of knowledge already there. I mean, you are proof of that. You already have students who are following a path. They're discovering, searching, looking, researching, experimenting, and looking for better solutions.
Sure. So as a matter of fact, if efforts can be made to support research and application, that's when you research, you have to apply. It could also help very much, because people research, they have the answers, but then they cannot apply, because you need means to do that. Yeah.
In my opinion, we all agree that chocolate is actually a luxurious good. So we don't need it to survive. But on the other hand, the farmers do need it to survive. And if it's a luxurious good, it shouldn't be cheap. That means that all the farmers actually should be really, really rich, because they are selling something luxurious. But this is not happening. But some people are getting rich out of chocolate.
Yes, many people are getting rich, especially those who buy the chocolate, those who buy illegally in particular, and others in the process, in the production process. They are better. Everybody's better than the farmer. That's the problem. If they could try to share the profit to an extent, look at the production costs, because in addition to all the problems we're looking at, we have also very bad roads, and that's what makes some of the farmers not to be able to negotiate the prices. They cannot carry their products to the market, and as such, some of these illegal buyers come right to the farm gate and propose any price. You cannot refuse, because you can't take it to another place, so you just take it. Those are the problems. So road infrastructure is a big deal.
Do the farmers in Cameroon, at least some of them, I know that all can't, but do some of them know that you are now here in Europe and telling these things to Austrians, Slovenes, Belgians?
I hope they know. I hope they know, because whenever I talk with farmers, when I go to research with farmers, when I ask them so many questions, they ask me, what next? What are they going to gain from that? And sometimes I feel so ashamed, because I ask myself, what can I do to you people? And I'll just tell them that Well, if I have the chance, I will tell the world your situation, and whoever is kind enough can help you. But I can't give you, a positive answer, on the spot.
So we've seen the problems and solutions exist in Cameroon. Then we saw some border issues and custom issues which do make it more difficult. And then we come to us, I mean, who like chocolate. I mean, what do you think, what is the advice, what can we do as buyers of the chocolate, as the final users of the chocolate, let's say, as those who eat it? Can we do something?
Yes, I think the efforts that are being made at the level of supermarkets, or if the supermarkets, their brands, they can make some extra effort to see to it that the farmers, have a fair share, it will be good. At this point, the fact that fair trade cocoa is being bought higher, the farmers have a higher premium, it's one step, but we can go further. Yeah.
And we, as we do buy things in supermarkets, we probably can also do something to push them to change their practices. I mean, to ask them for different practices, to demand fair chocolate, for which we know that actually nobody was exploited, not the environment, not the humans. We can avoid the chocolate which is not fair. These are some small things we can do, I guess.
Yeah, you're right, because those illegal buyers, they have no tag. And if chocolate passes through there, there's nothing that shows the quality. And if that is discouraged, then we'll discourage illegal buying and we'll only allow these real authentic buyers who are encouraging farmers, and that will help, I guess.
Plus, not to mention for us chocolate lovers, as we heard today at 20 Chocolate Production, it's not only the fair relations in the supply chain, it's also actually the quality of the chocolate and the different tastes. It's not just sugar, it's something much more.
Yeah, and talking about the quality of chocolate, I can assure you that Cameroon produces the best chocolate. Yeah, because our chocolate has very high fat content, and this is what those who process cocoa are looking for. It is a variety that is well adapted in Cameroon, the Forastero, which is not adapted in other places. So we have that special advantage of high quality cocoa. We like, based on this quality of cocoa, we have pretty higher yield than other producing countries. In addition to the fact that it's high quality, it's also high producing to our farmers.
Yes, and the cocoa butter is very necessary for cosmetics as well. So, and in
Sure,
cosmetics
sure.
you
And the
can
color,
sell it at much
the
higher
color,
prices.
the color of the forastero when it is being processed, it gives you some nice red color that you find in most of these finished products of cocoa that people admire so much. So most of the cocoa that products that you admire are surely from Cameroon.
Have you ever tried a Cameroonian cocoa? At least that you know of,
Anyone, the good ones that you eat are from Cameroon.
of course.
Do you know where is the cocoa you are eating, from in the chocolate you are eating? Yes. Good.
Should we yield the place for the questions?
Maybe we should. Do you have any questions, comments? Yeah.
Yes, I would like to ask you, if you compare the situation in other top producers, so in Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, uh, do they have, are there similar ways of production and problems? What are the differences or similarities in this
Yes,
process?
sorry,
Do
thanks.
you cooperate also with others?
I base my judgment here on secondary data. I've never been to farmers in Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, or Nigeria, but literature, from data that we have in literature, actually we're like the fourth producer, but when it comes to yield, the yield we are the third. When it comes to yield, we have Cote d'Ivoire is number one. The second is Togo, and the third is Cameroon. So, though we are fourth producers, we are like third in terms of the yield. In addition, I said the variety of cocoa in Cameroon is judged higher. This still is literature, where people feel that the high fatty content of our cocoa makes it more appreciated by the people who process cocoa. Coming to the problems, uh, in other cocoa producing countries, I've heard a lot more of child labor in places like Cote d'Ivoire and perhaps Ghana. But in Cameroon, child labor is very much controlled. If you see a child in the farm, the parents are training the child. The child is there to learn what he's going to do tomorrow, and we make sure that he's not doing something which is beyond his his ability. So there is hardly kind of child labor abuse in Cameroon. The way I see it well, on the average, I wouldn't say 100%. On a few cases, you could have very desperate families where the children have to fend for themselves. And if they are employed in some of these cocoa farms, they may be forced to do things beyond their level. And that, in that case, we can talk about child labor or abuse of child labor and things. But I think that looking at child labor, we are better placed. Why? Because the government and most of these multinational buyers, they emphasize on that before they can actually certify you as a fair trade, uh, as a fair trade producer. And most non-governmental organization and other institutions, they are out to impact the knowledge onto the farmers that the children need decent education. And so if you can only see children in the farm during the holidays when they're very free and doing just normal work and mostly education, the way I see it.
What about the environmental conditions are probably similar, somehow similar in the area, in the countries that are growing cocoa. The changes are similar because of, as a consequence of climate change, for example. Do you collaborate with other institutions from other countries in order to identify the best ways to adapt to new conditions?
Yeah, that is a bit pitiful because South-South cooperation is nearly inexistent. We have more of North-South cooperation, and we really hardly share our problems, which is actually something to regret. Because if we could share our problem, we as scientists from one country to another, we could be able to benefit from each other. But those corporations are nearly inexistent. We only write papers. Everybody writes his paper. And we never meet to discuss, to have something concrete.
Yeah, that's a pity. I think it has also something to do with the interest of the North. Of I'm not going to dig deep into it because you could have another debate into this one, but it's an interesting fact, yeah. That,
Some other questions?
So it was said there is a 3% decline in production. But what is the increase in demand globally in percentage if it's there?
Yeah, we're judging between demand and production. That's where the C 3% comes in. Yeah.
Maybe the second part is it said that the plants are old. But is this just in Cameroon or globally?
Because actually the production in Cameroon is not declining. I would say in Cameroon the production on the average is increasing. I'm just saying what is affecting some farms, but on at a global level the production is decreasing. Yeah.
And yes, this is the global problem actually,
Yeah.
because the as it's not just the situation in Cameroon that the producers are paid the least it's also a problem of all other countries or most of other countries, which means that young people, as Christopher mentioned, don't want to produce cocoa anymore. So yeah, and there's no money for investments, which means that they are not renewing the plantations. But of course, there are other people who start the plantations, but it will take a few years and so on. So yeah, the situation is a little bit complex, but
Thank you.
One more. How many sorts or types of cocoa are there
We have different varieties, but in
in the
terms of
world?
in the world, we have
Yeah.
three main varieties. But inside there, you can have sub varieties. Where people can breed for different things, either yield or disease resistance or taste. So we can have a lot of small sub varieties. But we have three main varieties. We have Criollo, we have Forastero, and when Forastero and Criollo are bred together, they form what we call Trinitario. In Cameroon, we have Forastero. Yeah.
and all the sub varieties of Forastero.
Right, 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 right.
Is the large part of the fat in the cocoa, is that because of the climate, because of the
The var-
earth,
because of the variety.
because of the variety?
Because of the
Okay.
variety, we have good conditions for that variety to thrive. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just one comment actually. You said that the young people don't want to work on fields,
Yeah.
and I think that education of these people to tell them how to work and to put them into these industries somehow it's not the solution. I was thinking why these multi corporations don't go there and make their own coffee. If we want to eat this, why these people have to be a part of it in general if they don't want to. I mean, is this a problem for me? Is this the problem? But
I, I don't think that it's a problem that they don't want to work in the fields or own the cocoa plantations. I think that people would like to do this because in the past they started planting cocoa and working cocoa plantations because they wanted, it was a chance for them to feed the families, to live a normal life. But the thing is that now the prices for the cocoa producers are decreasing, which means that they are getting less and less for a kilo or for a bag of cocoa, and that means that the young people just don't think that they can earn enough money to support their families with cocoa production, and they are forced actually to look for other means of supporting themselves and the families, right?
That's actually the key. There's diversification now. There are other options. There are many other options, and I would say cocoa is surviving. Why? Because it's in a zone where there is excess land. In the early 90s, where there was a sharp drop in the international market for cocoa and coffee, Arabica coffee was nearly zero in my country because it's produced in a place where land is very scarce. So people had to take a decision to substitute immediately. With cocoa, they have excess land, so they can do other things while waiting that things can happen because land is not a limiting factor. So, like I said, Arabica coffee was also a very important crop in my country, but now, where it was produced in the upper highlands of my country, which the land there, the population density is very high, so people had to take a decision and they clear off nearly everything to get into other crops which can give them income.
And also the other thing that you mentioned, the international companies taking charge and producing themselves or taking care of the production. This would only mean that they would find a way to take the land away from the native people and using it for the production of the cocoa, because cocoa only grows in the in yeah in Ecuador area, which means southern north of Ecuador, and this is This means that they just it happened actually to the banana plantations mostly, if we compare now, because for example, the biggest producers of bananas in the world is Ecuador, and in Ecuador, most of the land is owned or um, rented by the Americans, and they are actually the ones, um, I can't say it differently, running the show, which means that they are telling the local people what to grow, what are their wages, and so on. So everybody is working for the wages, not even for the profits anymore, which mean and the wages can decrease all the time. And of course, if you don't live there, if you are just the owner of the land far away, then you are just taking from the land. You are never giving back, which means that you are not taking care of the land. And that means that you just take as long as the land gives, and at the end you leave it sterilized or very poor. So the people who live there can't do anything about it anymore. So to give international corporations more power would be the worst thing ever.
But we can also mention that cocoa is a specific plant which has to be grown in a shade, meaning it has to be in a system where there are other plants around and above and below. And it's very labor intensive, meaning that it's still easier to be on a smaller units. While what is happening on tea plantations is something different, right?
Yeah, it's different. It's different with tea plantation. Tea plantation are actually owned by very rich people who can employ people, because with tea like harvest every day, nearly every day. So the profit I think is high. It's individual who employs people. It's not like in my country you don't have people who have individual tea farms. So one person has a tea farm and employs people to come work. He's making his money, and it's a different. The management there is different because the investment it depends on the person who owns the farm.
And you were mentioning the historical ownership of the land.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
about this?
Yeah, because of the fact that most of those rich people, they exploit big land area. That has brought about what we call land grabbing. So a lot of rich guys to go and send out young people, young poor farmers to exploit the land area for such large plantations, and it bringing a lot of problems. It has actually brought conflicts and has caused the lives of many people, which is regrettable actually.
Yeah, so maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to have this such a large owners. So this may be lucky or unlucky for the plant of cocoa, which is still
Yeah, it's
grown on small
still
farms.
small area, and then there's no big there's excess land in the equatorial area of Cameroon. But the problem is this: we are afraid that, or we wish that if cocoa production has to increase, it should be using a technology where we can have increase per unit area, not increase of surface area. Because increase of surface area means putting down the trees. And putting down the trees means provoking problems with global warming. That's why we believe that research that can improve production per unit area should be encouraged. Because most of the increase in production, like I'm saying in Cameroon, is more because of the land area for production that is increasing, not because the production per unit area is increasing, which is not the best option.
Would you say, compared to other production of other plants like bananas or plantains or tea, as you said, is cocoa much more difficult?
Uh, well, it's all depends. With banana, again, like tea, it's a corporation where the person who owns it has the means to do the best. Unlike cocoa, where there are small farmers. That's the big difference in management.
I think you said something really beautiful today. I think you said that you are working with farmers trying to improve the yield on
Yeah,
per
per
unit
unit area, because
area, and you said
right.
also that you are working with farmers with the idea that the farmers who own their farms
Yeah,
are doing the best they can and they know in given situation,
sure,
and that's where you start working with them.
sure. That is my domain. My domain. I'm a farming system. I do research in a system from a system point of view. The system point of view means that the yield that is obtained from a farm is the best possible that can be obtained under that given condition. So the farmer goes to the farm not with the intention to have a poor yield. He goes to the farm with the intention to have the best possible. It's at the end that we realize, we look at what he has obtained compared to what he can obtain, or what he could obtain under the system, that we realize there is a problem. And we, in a system approach, we go back to look at the components of the system. Where could the problem be? So it's not one answer. It cannot be like go and add the fertilizer. No. It cannot be like go and change the plants to young plants. It involves so many people. Goes even to socioeconomic approaches, to agronomic approaches, and things like that before we can solve the problem. It's not a straightforward answer. That is why many people, like I'm here, I'm in a research team. Not everybody is a crop scientist like me. We have people from different components. We join our ideas to try to see how we can improve the system.
So I think the systemic point of view should be used more often, not only in the production of cocoa, but also in using of chocolate system, where we are all members of,
Right,
where there
right,
is no one simple answer on how to make
yeah,
the thing better,
right,
but there are several things each of us can do, right?
right.
And I think we should call on everybody to do their share, what
Yeah.
you can. I mean, as
Sure.
the farmer does the best they can,
Yeah.
as you do in the research field the best you
Right.
can,
Everybody
also
else
we can do the
contribute.
best we can.
Sure. And they become sustainable. Okay, that's what we're looking for.
Definitely sustainability.
Yeah. Sure.
Next question. More questions.
Is there a culture of cooperation between farmers? Like in Europe, there are many cooperatives, and I know in South America, cooperatives are very big thing.
Sure. There's cooperation only when the people are in a cooperative, like you put it. But all those who are not in a cooperative, they don't benefit very much. They can once in a while get in contact, but then it's not efficient. But in the cooperative, like I said, most of the cooperatives have been certified as fair trade. In that case, they have given them the rules and they have educated them on how to go about those rules, and all the farmers there are acquainted with that, and they can exchange the ideas and go as far as possible. But those who are not in the group, they are lacking. They are lacking, and that is the reason why the government and many other organizations are struggling to make sure that everybody becomes part of this kind of a group to benefit. And I think that's one of the ways by which we can improve the level of income of the farmers and hence the production of cocoa.
What actually keeps the farmers out of it? I mean, farmers see the neighbors,
Yeah.
they speak to each other. Also, they hear that, okay, so I'm part of this
Yeah.
thing. We get together, we talk.
Right.
I get this knowledge, and everything is much better than it used to be.
Sure. Actually, the farmer knows that, perhaps he knows that it's a good idea. But like I said, they're very poor. They are very poor, such that when he needs his money, you know, the corporate needs to collect their goods and negotiate the prices before selling. It takes time. If the guy needs the money right now, any illegal buyer can come and get it and give any amount of money. So that's the problem.
So basically, cooperatives should also take care of
Sure.
some kind of finance.
Right. And that's the only way the farmers can get money, because banks cannot give them any loan because they find farming, kind of a risky business. They have no other way to get money than from these illegal guys who buy. And sometimes they give this money well in advance, before the production. Knowing that at harvest you have to give me this amount of cocoa. Whether the price of cocoa does what in the international market, we have a deal. And that is one of the problems that is going to kill the farmers. That kills the farmers. The small farmers. Yeah.
There was an interesting similarity we found out today between Slovenia and Cameroon and the small farmers. I mean, like in Cameroon, there are many small farmers. In Slovenia, there are very small farmers. both had a history of working together back some time back, usually joined by a certain organ from the top down. And then there was a period which was opened and people didn't know how to cooperate, especially not how to enter in cooperatives. Is this maybe also one of the problems, being poor without means, plus not being used to having a period in history where this was not a practice and they're not used to collaborate in this way?
Yeah, what I think it boils down to education of the farmers. If the farmer can be made to understand a few things, he can even take a risk. He can risk by saying, no, I know the best way. I can even borrow, I know I'm going to get something better. But once this education is not well embedded in the farmer, he will still be, lacking and will always be weak, the way I see it.
One more. How big problem are pesticides? Yeah.
Yes.
Because are the farmers able to get good production without pesticides, or because all of these diseases that affect the
Yeah.
plants? How is it that?
Yeah, we feel that one of the reasons why the production is low is because they don't have enough means to control the pests and the diseases. They have very little means, and that is one of the problems to that affects the yield. So that's why we feel at some point that most of Cameroon cocoa is organic. Why? Because the farmers apply little or no conventional inputs because of their poor level. Yeah.
Okay, if no other comments are there, I would just encourage you just to continue the way you are doing. It sounds really a lot of work has been done, and I would like to thank you all and for listening to us and for being interested. And of course, there is a call of all of us getting better. Of course, anything better and fair chocolate and cocoa and other things too, especially the ones which are not coming from the neighborhood and they are coming from outside of the EU, because sometimes we respect the rules in the EU but don't apply them for things, people, crops out of the EU. So I think we can all do our small steps. This will be my comment, and I leave the comment to Jiva and the last word maybe to you.
I would just like to add thank you, yes, for coming. And if you have any additional questions in the future about any of these topics that we were discussing today, not only about cocoa but also other things, please feel free to either contact Focus or Fairtrade, Pravična Trgovina, or Buna, or any other non-governmental organization you think that could have an answer in Slovenia, and we will exchange it and try to answer, because it's very important for all of us to get as aware as possible of these topics that we are discussing or we were discussing. And if we don't have the answers here, we will try to find Christopher again or somebody like Christopher to tell us.
So I am really honored to be with you today. It's a really big pleasure for me. I've never really had this chance to share with people who are interested, and I pray that we can also participate as components of the system to see how we can make this production more sustainable with time, not only for us but for our children to come. And the University of Chang, where I come from, is willing to participate as far as research is concerned. And if you have any way to support us, we'll be very grateful.
Thank you. And thank you for all the questions as well, and the comments, of course.